I got home early that morning, earlier than anyone expected. I was excited, thrilled even, to surprise my husband, Michael, and our 5-year-old daughter, Sophie. The plan was simple: walk in, catch them laughing, maybe tickle Sophie a little, and let Michael groan at my impeccable timing. But what I found instead made my heart stop in a way I've never experienced before. Have you ever returned to your own home and felt like a stranger had moved in? Like the life you built overnight had been quietly replaced while you weren't looking? That's exactly how it felt. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. I reached into my purse for my keys. The familiar weight in my hand should have been comforting, but it wasn't. I slid the key into the lock, twisted it, and felt nothing. My key wouldn't turn. I tried again, harder. Still nothing. Panic began to prick at the edges of my mind. That key had opened my door every single day for the past 5 years. And now it wouldn't even budge. I looked closer and realized the lock was completely different. The doorknob had been replaced. Even the doorbell was new, shining, unfamiliar. I took a step back. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe Michael had arranged some elaborate joke. But the unease in my chest said otherwise. I glanced around the front porch, half expecting Michael or Sophie to jump out with giggles and confetti. Only silence answered me. That silence wasn't comforting, it was wrong. Then, slowly, the door began to open. And there she was. A woman I had never seen before. She was wearing my robe, the one I had left draped over the back of my bedroom chair. She looked completely at ease, sipping from a mug as if she'd been living here for years. But what terrified me most wasn't the robe, or even the audacity of her presence. It was the way she looked at me, like I was the one intruding. "This house was sold last week," she said calmly, almost apologetically. My stomach dropped. My voice froze. My mind screamed that this couldn't be real. How could my home, our home, be sold without me knowing? What had happened while I was away? And more importantly, who was this woman standing in the middle of my living room, wearing my life like it belonged to her? I wanted to run. I wanted to yell. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. I froze in the doorway, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure the woman could hear it. She didn't move. She just stared at me with this calm, almost smug look, like I had somehow wandered into the wrong house by accident. My mind raced. My key wouldn't turn, the lock had changed, the doorbell was new, and now this stranger was standing in my home wearing my robe. I took a cautious step back. "Who are you?" I managed to croak. The woman smiled faintly, tilting her head as if studying me. "I live here now," she said casually, as if she were telling me the weather. "You probably didn't know, but your house has a new owner." I blinked. My house? My family? The life I had spent years building? How could this be possible? I stepped inside anyway, desperate for some kind of explanation. My eyes swept the room, landing on subtle but shocking differences. The couch cushions were slightly rearranged. The framed photos on the wall were mostly gone. My daughter's drawings, some had been taken, some left behind, hung crookedly on the fridge. It was like someone had tried to create a ghost version of my home, leaving just enough to make it recognizable but utterly wrong. Why are you here? Where's my family?" I asked, voice trembling. The woman sipped from a mug, my mug, and set it down carefully on the counter. "Oh, don't worry about them," she said lightly. "They aren't here. You'll have to ask them where they are." A mix of panic and disbelief twisted in my stomach. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call Michael. But when I reached for my phone, I noticed something even more unsettling. My daughter's backpack, the one she had carried every morning, was still by the door, untouched. That small detail didn't add up. It suggested Sophie had been here recently, or someone had staged it to make me think she wasn't. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the woman was in the wrong house. But everything about her, the way she moved, the casual familiarity with my space, the robe, screamed that she wasn't just visiting. Then, just as I was gathering the courage to demand answers, I heard it. A soft creak upstairs. Someone, maybe more than one person, was moving in my home. I froze. My mind raced. Was it Michael? Was it Sophie? Or was it something else entirely? Before I could react, the woman glanced up at the stairs, then back at me and smiled. "You might want to see this," she said softly. And that's when the unease turned into pure terror. I didn't know what to do next. My mind was spinning, my chest tight, and every instinct screamed at me to leave. But I couldn't just walk away. This was my home, or at least it used to be. I had to know what was happening. Slowly, I began to explore, my footsteps quiet on the familiar floors that now felt alien. Every corner, every familiar piece of furniture, seemed just slightly wrong. The stranger followed at a distance, calm and unbothered. "I didn't take everything," she said. "Just the essentials. Some things the previous owners left behind felt like gifts." Her voice was polite, almost motherly, but the undertones sent chills down my spine. Gifts? She'd taken our life and packaged it like a present for herself. I moved into the kitchen, and my eyes fell on my favorite coffee mug, her fingers wrapped around it. She had my robe, my mug, even my routine down. It was as if she had been living here long enough to study me. And that made me question everything. What else had she noticed? How long had she been watching? I had returned home thinking I'd surprise my family, and instead, I was the intruder. I needed answers. I pulled out my phone and called Michael. No answer. Panic turned into dread. Then I called the real estate agent, Karen. After a few tense rings, she picked up. Her voice was cautious, measured. "Yes," she said slowly, "your house was sold. Legally. Last week." I know it's confusing, but it's all above board. Legally sold? I felt my knees go weak. "But that's impossible," I said, my voice rising. "We live here. We have a mortgage. Our things are here." Karen sighed. "I know. There was some paperwork error. The previous owner's account was foreclosed, and somehow your house got sold before you were notified. I'm sorry. It's complicated." I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just fear anymore, it was betrayal. My life had been quietly rewritten while I was away. My home, the one place I felt safe, had been hijacked. And the stranger woman, standing in my kitchen in my robe, knew it. She knew everything. Then I noticed something small, subtle, but unmistakable. A piece of Sophie's toy had been moved from the living room to the dining table. She hadn't been here. Not really. Someone had staged this. Before I could gather my thoughts, the woman turned toward me with that same unnerving calm. "You'll want to see this," she said. Her eyes glinted with something I couldn't quite name, and in that moment, I realized I wasn't just fighting for my home. I was fighting for the truth. And what I found out next was more shocking than anything I could have imagined. I had to get answers. I couldn't stay trapped inside my own home, not while a stranger moved through my life with that eerie calm. I stepped outside and walked to the neighbors' houses, hoping someone had seen something, hoping someone could explain how my home had been stolen from me while I was gone. But the neighbors were polite and confused. They all remembered the sale. But none of them could explain the odd timing, the sudden change, or why they hadn't seen me notified. Next, I called Karen, the real estate agent again, demanding details. She was hesitant at first, then finally admitted something unsettling. The bank had foreclosed on the property, but there had been a clerical error. Somehow, my house had been sold legally to a third party, and the paperwork had been rushed and mostly unsigned by me, or so she claimed. I felt my stomach twist. Legal, yes. But legal didn't make it right. My home, my sanctuary, had been hijacked under the guise of bureaucracy. I returned, determined to confront the woman. She was still there, calm as ever, seated at the dining table with a cup of my coffee in her hands. "You really don't understand, do you?" she said softly, almost pitying me. I demanded answers. How she knew about my routines, my family, my things. She tilted her head and smiled. "I've been observing, studying, preparing. It's nothing personal. Just efficiency." The air thickened. My blood ran cold. She didn't just know where everything was, she knew my schedule, my husband's habits, Sophie's little quirks. Whoever she was, she had planned this meticulously. It wasn't a random error or a bureaucratic mistake. This was calculated. I wanted to scream, to pull her away, to reclaim my life. But I felt paralyzed. There was no immediate way to undo what had been done, no simple explanation, no quick fix. All I could do was watch, heart hammering, as she moved through the house with my ease, wearing my robe like a crown. Then, as if sensing my thoughts, she looked directly at me. "You'll see soon," she said. "This isn't the end, Emma. Not for you. Not for anyone who thinks a home is just four walls and a door. Some things are permanent." I froze. Her words weren't just threatening, they were prophetic. I realized, with a sinking sense of inevitability, that my life as I knew it had changed forever. My house, my memories, even my sense of safety had been rewritten in ways I couldn't yet fully comprehend. And as I stood there, powerless in the living room that once felt like my kingdom, I knew one thing with absolute clarity: what had happened wasn't over. In fact, it was only beginning. I finally stepped back from the chaos, trying to make sense of everything. My home, my life, had been upended in ways I could never have imagined. I had returned, eager to surprise my family, and instead found a stranger in my robe, moving through my house like she owned not just the space, but my memories, my routines, my very sense of safety. It was surreal, terrifying, and deeply personal all at once. I looked around at the living room, at the photographs I recognized, but that no longer felt like mine, at Sophie's toys scattered with eerie precision. The air smelled faintly of her perfume mixed with mine, a reminder that she had been here, in my life, in my home, long before I even arrived. I realized then that a home isn't just walls and furniture, it's the life you fill it with. And someone had intruded, rearranged, and claimed that life as their own. I thought back to the morning, to the first time I tried my key. I remembered the disbelief, the panic, the feeling of betrayal that pulsed through me with every step. And I thought about the stranger, calm, composed, unnervingly familiar with my life. She wasn't just a person occupying space. She was a force, a reminder that the things we take for granted, our safety, our routine, our identity, can be stolen without warning. Yet, in the midst of fear, there was a clarity I hadn't felt before. I couldn't control everything that had happened, but I could control how I responded. I could reclaim my strength, my voice, and my awareness. This experience, terrifying as it was, taught me something. Vigilance isn't paranoia. Awareness isn't fear. Sometimes life shifts under your feet, and you have to adapt faster than you ever thought possible. As I stepped toward the door, preparing to face whatever came next, I realized something else. The stranger had left, but her presence lingered in ways I couldn't erase. Every creak, every shadow, every familiar object now carried a tension I hadn't noticed before. My home felt different. My life felt different. And I understood, with a chilling certainty, that this wasn't just about a house. It was about control, observation, and the fragility of normalcy. So I ask you, what would you do if the life you built could be quietly rewritten while you weren't looking? How would you react if someone stepped into your world, wearing your life like it belonged to them? Think about that next time you lock your door, because sometimes the danger isn't outside. Sometimes it's already inside. And just when you think you're safe, just when you think it's over, someone is always watching, waiting, ready to step into the life you thought was yours.